Let's talk about this fascinating movement from the second sonata by Chopin. It's not an accident that this remains as one of the most fascinating pieces, the most loved pieces ever played. And I wanted to share with you today a few things to pay attention to, or perhaps a few things to inspire you when you decide to study this piece. I think instead of focusing on the technical details and aspects of this movement, we can talk about creating an atmosphere from the very beginning. The first thing that you can think about is tempo. I personally would pick a tempo that is very slow, because this movement works anyway. Because look, if I take a faster tempo, it works very well. But you can also pick a tempo that's even heavier, that's even more somber. So I think you have to consider what exactly type of mood do you want to create. The repetition of this, of the left hand, you see, because we have this kind of chords, they never resolve. They immediately create tension and they keep on going bar after bar. You have the same chords that give this very heavy and very dark feeling without any resolution, without any hope. That in itself is going to help us. Whatever tempo we choose, it's going to sound heavy, it's going to sound dark anyway. But now it's a matter of personal taste to choose how slow. I prefer, well, to be fair and honest, my moods also change, and so sometimes I would change the tempo. But right now, I was thinking a slower tempo, a very heavy tempo, and I will tell you what you have to consider once you start doing that. So I like... What you have to pay attention in this kind of tempo are two things. One is that every single chord you play has tension. You have to make sure that every chord you play has... and not get too weak. Because if you play too weak in such a slow tempo, the sound is going to disappear, and so the tension is going to disappear. You want to maintain this kind of tension. So what's going to happen in this tempo is that instead of playing piano, I'm going to play probably mezzo forte, because the sound is going to stay there, and so the tension is going to remain. Now if I play a faster tempo, I can afford to go a little softer, because we're in a faster tempo, the sound is going to not disappear. So that's the thing to consider when you're choosing your tempi. The second thing that is very important to create this atmosphere is the dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note. That's something fascinating in this piece. It's all the time there, and the reason for that is funeral march. Think of the procession. Think of these dark times, people carrying the coffin. It gives you a feeling of no matter how painful it is, no matter how heavy it is, it keeps on going. The procession needs to continue. Life needs to continue. And so when you play the dotted 8th note followed by a 16th note, make sure that you don't create a triplet. Make sure that you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and not... Because the mistake here is that what people make is that they play the 16th note too soon, and that gives a feeling of a triplet, which is much more relaxing and less sharp, less painful. You see? So you have to watch out that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And now without counting. So in your head, when you are practicing, make sure that you are really having the 1, 2, 3, 4, and on 4 you're playing the 16th note. That's how you can create tension. I think what creates a very dark and ominous atmosphere is if you try that almost every single chord later in the piece things are changing, but the beginning, in order to capture the audience right away, you need almost every single chord to be approximately at the same volume. That's what I really like. And the only chord, the only time that you're going to play softer is the last beat of the bar. Why? Because if you check carefully, you will see that we have two voices. We have the melody and we have a secondary voice. And so this last note, the G flat, later on it's again the G flat, needs to be a little bit softer, because that's going to help the atmosphere stay dark and not become heavy at the same time. You don't want to hit because that's going to interfere with the melody. So if you want the listener to be focused on your melody, make sure that every note, like I said, is approximately the same volume, because that goes very well with the melody. And then drop the last one a little softer, and then again. Later you can afford to play every note. For example, if you look at bar 5, because we have the melody, you don't have to drop the last beat because it's still a melody. And bar 6, you drop the last note, so you can still make sure that the listener can follow the melody and that the secondary voice doesn't interfere with the melody. Those are a few of the things that you can pay attention once you start practicing the piece. Think about your tempo, think about your balance, how you divide the notes, and think about the dynamic. What kind of a dynamic works well with the tempo you're choosing? Is it a little louder or is it a little softer? Nevertheless, always make sure that every chord has a substantial sound, has a sound that supports it and that gives tension to the piece. The piece is very dark. The piece is not just a soft piece because of everything I said till now about the funeral procession, about the heaviness of that moment. So you don't want to play weak. You don't want to play just soft. There has to be some tension into each chord. Anyway, I think that you really enjoy practicing and learning this piece, and I hope the video gives you some inspiration once you start studying the piece. If you have questions about this piece or any other piece that you are playing, don't hesitate as always to let us know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching the video, and we'll see you next week again.